So thank you very much for having me. Look forward to talking about the SpaceX Mars architecture, and what I really want to try to achieve here is to make Mars seem possible, make it seem as though it's something that we can do in our lifetimes, and that you can go. And is there really a way that anyone could go if they wanted to? I think that's really the important thing. And if we can get the cost of moving to Mars to be roughly equivalent to a median house price in the U.S., which is around $200,000, then I think the probability of establishing a self-sustaining civilization is very high. I think it would almost certainly occur. Not everyone would want to go. In fact, I think a relatively small number of people from Earth would want to go, but enough would want to go and who could afford the trip that it would happen. These are the key elements that are needed in order to achieve the 4.5 order of magnitude improvement. Most of the improvement would come from full reusability, somewhere between 2 and 2.5 orders of magnitude. And then the other 2 orders of magnitude would come from refilling in orbit, propellant production on Mars, and choosing the right propellant. As an example of the difference between reusability and expendability in aircraft, and this you could actually use any form of transport. You could say a car, bicycle, horse. If they were single use, almost no one would use them. It would be too expensive. But with frequent flights, you can take something like an aircraft that costs $90 million, and if it was single use, you'd have to pay $500,000 per flight. But you can actually buy a ticket on Southwest right now from LA to Vegas for $43, including taxes. So that's a massive improvement. Now you get to use the booster and the tanker as frequently as you'd like, and so that's why it really makes a lot of sense to load the spaceship into orbit with essentially tanks dry and have it have really quite big tanks that you then use the booster and tanker to refill while it's in orbit and maximize the payload of the spaceship so that when it goes to Mars, you really have a very large payload capability. So it really wouldn't make sense to leave your spaceships on Mars. You really want to build a propellant plant on Mars and send the ships back. So, and Mars happens to work out well for that because it has a CO2 atmosphere, it's got water ice in the soil, and with H2O and CO2 you can produce CH4, methane, and oxygen O2. So when we looked at the overall system optimization, it was clear to us that that methane actually was the clear winner. So it would require maybe anywhere from 50 to 60% of the energy on Mars to refill propellant using the propellant depot, and just the technical challenges are a lot easier. So we think methane's actually better on just really almost across the board. Just to show you where we started off. In 2002, SpaceX basically consisted of carpet and a mariachi band. That was it. That's all of SpaceX in 2002. As you can see, I'm a dancing machine. Yeah, I believe in kicking off celebratory events with mariachi bands. I really like mariachi bands. But that was what we started off with in 2002. So we go from 2002, where we basically were clueless, and then developed with Falcon 1 the smallest useful orbital rocket that we could think of, which would deliver half a ton to orbit. And then 4 years later, we developed and built the first vehicle. So we developed the main engine, the upper stage engine, the airframes, the fairing, and the launch system, and had our first attempt at launch in 2006, which failed. So that lasted about 60 seconds, unfortunately. But 2006, 4 years after starting, is also when we actually got our first NASA contract. And I just want to say I'm incredibly grateful to NASA for supporting SpaceX, despite the fact that our rocket crashed. Finally, the fourth launch of Falcon 1 worked in 2008, and we were really down to our last pennies. In fact, I only thought I had enough money for 3 launches, and the first 3 bloody failed. We were able to scrape together enough to just barely make it and do a 4th launch. And thank goodness that 4th launch succeeded in 2008. Also, at the end of 2008 is when NASA awarded us the first major operational contract, which was for resupplying cargo to the space station and bringing cargo back. Then a couple of years later, we did the first launch of Falcon 9, version 1, and that had about a 10-ton to orbit capability, so it was about 20 times the capability of Falcon 1, and also was assigned to carry our Dragon spacecraft. 2012 is when we delivered and returned cargo from the space station. 2013 is when we first started doing vertical takeoff and landing tests, and then 2014 is when we were able to have the first orbital booster do a soft landing in the ocean. The landing was soft, it fell over and exploded, but the landing, for 7 seconds, it was good. 2015, well, last year, in December, that was definitely one of the best moments of my life when the rocket booster came back and landed at Cape Canaveral. So that was really, yeah. So looking into the future, next steps, we were kind of intentionally a bit fuzzy about this timeline, but we're going to try to make as much progress as we can on the elements of the interplanetary transport booster and spaceship, and hopefully we'll be able to complete the first development spaceship in maybe about 4 years, and start doing suborbital flights with that. So then what about beyond Mars? So as we thought about the system, and the reason we call it a system, because generally I don't like calling things systems because everything's a system, including your dog, is that it's actually more than a vehicle. There's obviously the rocket booster, the spaceship, the tanker, and the propellant plant, the in situ propellant production. If you have all of those 4 elements, you can actually go anywhere in the solar system by planet hopping or moon hopping. So by establishing a propellant depot in the asteroid belt or on one of the moons of Jupiter, you can make flights from Mars to Jupiter no problem. In fact, even without a propellant depot at Mars, you can do a flyby of Jupiter without a propellant depot. But by establishing a propellant depot, let's say Enceladus or Europa or any of there's a few options, and then doing another one on Titan, Jupiter, Saturn's moon, and then perhaps another one further out on Pluto or elsewhere in the solar system. This system really gives you freedom to go anywhere you want in the greater solar system. This basic system, provided we have filling stations along the way, means full access to the entire greater solar system. Yeah.